It is not he who has too little, but he who craves more that is poor. Epictetus said that almost 2,000 years ago. And it applies to approval more than almost anything else in your life. The more approval you chase, the less respect you actually get. And most people don't even realize they're doing it. It sounds backwards. But the Stoics understood exactly why this happens, and they built an entire way of living around it. Today, 5 specific shifts. Each one moves you from needing approval to commanding respect. Stick around for the 4th one. It's the one almost nobody wants to hear. Here's the pattern almost nobody notices. The moment you need someone's approval, you've quietly handed them power over you. Not power over your actions. Power over how you feel about yourself. Every time you soften an opinion, just to keep someone comfortable, every time you over-explain a decision, just so nobody's upset with you, you're paying a toll. And people can feel it, even if they can't name it. Think about the last time you watched someone constantly check the room before speaking, adjusting their opinion depending on who was listening, laughing a little too hard at things that weren't funny. You could feel it, even if you couldn't explain why. Something about it read as smaller than they actually were. Now think about someone who simply said what they thought, calmly, without checking anyone's face first. You probably don't remember agreeing with every opinion they had, but you remember respecting them. That's the entire mechanism. Respect isn't built by being agreed with. It's built by being unmistakably yourself, consistently, whether or not the room approves. Respect works the opposite way from approval. Epictetus divided the world into 2 categories: things in your control and things that aren't. Your actions, your effort, your character, yours, other people's opinions of you, never yours. Not even a little. The moment you fully accept that, something shifts. You stop performing for approval. And the strange part is, that's exactly when people start respecting you. Enough theory. Here's the first shift. Almost everyone over-explains, and it's quietly costing them respect every single time. Watch what happens next time you decline an invitation or make a decision someone disagrees with. Most people immediately follow it with 3 reasons why. That's not politeness. That's asking for permission after the fact. Real example. Someone declines a dinner invite. The approval-seeking version says, "I'm so sorry, I've just had such a long week, and I promise I'll make it up to you, I feel terrible." The respected version says, "I can't make it tonight. Let's grab coffee next week instead." Same decision. Completely different amount of power in the room. Notice what actually happened in that second version. There's no apology buried in it, and no plea for the other person's understanding. There's a fact and a small gesture toward the relationship, stated once, with nothing left hanging in the air waiting for approval. The Stoics called this living according to nature, meaning simply saying what's true without dressing it up in apology. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself constantly not to waste energy explaining his character to people who'd already decided not to understand it. He wasn't being cold about it. He'd simply noticed that most explanations don't change anyone's mind. They just extend the negotiation. Takeaway: give your reason once, if it's even needed. Then stop. Every extra sentence after that isn't clarity. It's a quiet request for approval. Because every time you defend a decision nobody actually challenged, you teach people your choices are up for a vote. Every one of these shifts works the same way. Approval is something you beg for. Respect is something you simply stop negotiating. Here's the uncomfortable truth. The people who need to understand you the most are often the people who never will. This next one feels almost impossible at first, because it goes against everything you've been taught about being liked. Most of us grew up being rewarded, in small ways, for being easy to understand and easy to agree with. Nobody sat us down and taught this shift on purpose. It usually only comes after enough years of watching approval chasing quietly fail to produce respect, no matter how much of it you collect. The shift is this: not everyone needs to understand your decision, your silence, or your boundary. Some misunderstanding is simply the cost of having a spine. Diogenes, one of the most famously unbothered Stoics in history, lived exactly how he wanted, in full view of people who mocked him constantly for it. He never once stopped to correct their opinion of him, not because he didn't care about people, because he understood their opinion of him wasn't actually his responsibility to manage. There's something worth sitting with there. Diogenes wasn't performing indifference for an audience. He genuinely didn't organize his life around what the crowd concluded about him, which is exactly why the crowd over time ended up respecting him despite themselves. Real example. You set a boundary with a family member, say no longer lending money. They tell others you've changed, that you're cold now. The approval-seeking response is to overcorrect, to prove them wrong, to win back the narrative. The respected response is to simply let the boundary stand, uncommented on. Here's the mistake most people make. They confuse being misunderstood with being wrong. Those are two completely different things. One is a fact about how someone else perceived you. The other is a fact about your character. Only one of those is actually yours to worry about. Takeaway. When someone misreads your decision, resist the urge to correct the story. Let the decision speak. Most of the time it speaks louder than any explanation could. By now you've probably noticed something. None of these shifts are about becoming colder or caring less. They're about removing your need for a verdict from people who were never qualified to give one. How many of your decisions are actually yours? Here's something that separates respected people from everyone else almost instantly. They ask their own judgment first, and the crowd's opinion second, if at all. Most people do it backwards. A decision comes up, and the very first question is, what will people think? By the time their own judgment gets a turn, it's already been shaped by everyone else's expectations. Marcus Aurelius wrote about this constantly, mostly because he had to remind himself daily, ruling an empire full of people with very loud opinions about what an emperor should do. His answer was simple. Ask whether the action is just, whether it's honest, whether it holds up under his own scrutiny. The crowd's applause or criticism came after, and mattered far less. This wasn't arrogance on his part. It was closer to a survival strategy. An emperor who reorganized his decisions around every faction's approval would have been paralyzed within a week. The only stable ground was his own honest judgment, checked carefully, then trusted. Real example. Two people get the same piece of harsh public criticism online. One spends the whole day checking replies, adjusting their next move to please the loudest critics. The other reads it once, asks honestly whether there's a real point buried in it, takes what's useful, and moves on with their day. One of them is still respected a year from now. The other has spent a year negotiating with strangers. Takeaway: before asking what people will think, ask what you actually think. Let your own judgment go first, every time. Quick pause. If you've made it this far, here's something worth knowing. Most people watching a video like this drop off right around now, halfway through, because the first few ideas start to feel familiar. So here's a promise. The next two shifts are the ones that actually change how people treat you, not just how you feel. Stay for these. Here's the shift almost nobody wants to hear, because it means giving something up that feels safe. By this point, notice something happening in your own head. Some of these might already feel uncomfortable to imagine actually doing out loud with real people watching. That discomfort isn't a sign you're on the wrong track. It's usually a sign you've found the exact habit that's been quietly costing you respect for years. This is the one that quietly ruins the most potential. Making yourself smaller, quieter, less opinionated, specifically so nobody feels threatened by you. It feels like safety. It's actually a slow trade. You give up your presence piece by piece in exchange for being easy to be around. And here's the part that stings. People rarely respect what they don't have to work to understand. Read that again. Shrinking isn't humility. Real example. In a meeting, someone has a genuinely good idea but softens it into a question instead of a statement, just to avoid sounding too confident. Maybe we could possibly try, I don't know, just an idea, something like this. The idea gets ignored, not because it was bad, because it was delivered like an apology. The Stoics never confused humility with self-erasure. Humility to them meant an accurate view of yourself, not an artificially small one. Confidence, stated plainly, without needing anyone's permission to exist, was considered a virtue, not arrogance. There's an important distinction hiding in that. Arrogance inflates your view of yourself beyond what's true. Self-erasure shrinks it below what's true. Both are inaccurate. The Stoics simply asked for accuracy, stated without flinching. Here's what this actually costs long-term. Every time you shrink to avoid discomfort, you're not being kind. You're teaching people your opinions matter less than their comfort. Takeaway. Say the full version of your thought, not the safe, watered-down version. State it plainly, once, and let it stand on its own. One shift left. And it's the one that makes every other shift actually stick. You could apply the first 4 shifts perfectly for a month and still quietly fall apart the first time an outcome goes badly. That's what this last one exists to fix. This is the foundation underneath everything else, because without it, every other shift eventually collapses back into approval seeking. The shift is this: your worth was never tied to whether people approve, whether the decision works out, whether you're liked afterward. It was only ever tied to whether you acted with integrity, given what you knew at the time. Marcus Aurelius separated effort from outcome constantly in his own writing. Do the right action as well as you can. What happens after that, the reaction, the result, the applause, or the silence, was never fully yours to control. So it was never his to stake his identity on. This is where all 4 earlier shifts quietly depend on this 5th one. You can stop over-explaining, stop correcting misunderstandings, trust your own judgment, and stop shrinking. And still fall apart the moment an outcome goes badly, if your worth is still secretly tied to results. This shift is what makes the other four sustainable instead of temporary. Real example. Someone starts a business that eventually fails, despite honest, disciplined effort. The approval-seeking mind reads this as proof they're not good enough. The Stoic mind reads it as one outcome, in one attempt, that doesn't touch the character behind the effort. This changes everything about how failure and criticism actually land on you. Takeaway: judge yourself by your effort and your integrity, never by whether the room approved of the result. Here's what all 5 of these actually have in common. Every one of them takes something you were quietly outsourcing: your decisions, your self-image, your sense of worth, and hands it back to you. Approval is borrowed. Someone can take it away the moment you disagree with them. Respect is built, one unapologetic decision at a time, and it doesn't disappear the moment you stop performing. Think about the people you actually respect most in your own life. Chances are it's not the ones who agreed with you the most, or who were the easiest to please. It's the ones who stayed exactly themselves, whether or not you approved, and let you decide for yourself what to make of them. That's the entire shift, in one sentence. Stop trying to be agreed with. Start being unmistakably yourself, and let agreement be optional. The next time you feel that familiar urge to explain, soften, or shrink, pause for a second. Ask yourself one question. Am I doing this because it's honest, or because I'm afraid of what happens if I don't? That single question asked enough times quietly changes who you become. Because the version of you that needs no approval is the version everyone ends up respecting most. Nobody respects a person mid-negotiation. And that's exactly what approval-seeking is. A quiet, endless negotiation for permission to exist as you already are. The moment you stop negotiating, the negotiation ends. If this helped you see approval differently, subscribe to Stoic Virtus for one Stoic idea like this every single week.